Oh man, so I was in a D&D campaign, like from like I want to say late 2019 to like I want to 2021.
Hmm.
Oh, did my camera just go out?
Yeah, it did.
Oh, okay. Um, Hold on.
Don't really know what that was about. But it's interview time again, and I interviewed HOROSHA, an incredibly knowledgeable and talented producer, singer, songwriter from the good old Midwest. And we had a wonderful discussion about, early influences as always, as well as the process of music production and, doing live performances. It was really fun talk. And I hope that you all, I hope that you all enjoy. Have fun. But thank you so much for
Well,
joining me today. We're talking to Hirosha,
hey,
a
what's up?
producer, a singer, a songwriter,
I do some
uh,
stuff, couple things.
a hardcore enjoyer. Is that
I
true?
am a hardcore enjoyer of
That's what I
many
thought.
things,
I was gonna be real
many of
embarrassed
which
if I
being
got that
music,
wrong.
but
Yeah, no.
like there's
So
also other things. I also enjoy other things.
the hardcore
So,
interests extend beyond just music.
oh yeah,
That's
for
good.
sure.
That's good.
I'm a
Um.
whole human being and I have a personality.
So
I
so.
make Oh, sorry. Go
No,
on.
you're good. You're good. I do want to jump right into that name, Hirosha,
Sure.
which is Japanese. Couple different translations, but in general, it translates to wanderer or vagrant, or a combination of the two, being wandering vagrant. Um, so how did you come to that name? And I guess in the context of your music, like, what does it mean to you as an artist?
So, I think the good starting point of this is right around like 2019. I had a different project. It was called Last Chance Avenue. It was like a pop punk project or whatever. But I started getting really into like just lo-fi beats, so like lo-fi hip hop. I'd go on like the Spotify playlist channels and just kind of like listen to that a lot in the background. And I hadn't really done a lot of um producing other outside of like kind of like a rock full band context. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try my hand at doing some lo-fi production. So I started working on that stuff. And I guess a good way that I came around to the name is, first of all, like you said, that was correct with the definitions. It's like wander or vagrant. I think there was one definition sort of that came up that sort of struck me, is that someone who is on a journey with no destination. So I
Okay.
mean that's essentially rounds out to the same thing, you know. And I like the idea of a name having that sort of symbolism that is like, kind of, at least from my perspective, or someone who is English speaking, would take a little work to uncover.
Well, it
Um,
kind of embodies music and like making music as a whole, where there, very little times is there like a defined goal or like predetermined end point for like making music. It's sort of more of a continual process.
oh yeah, and that's kind of the idea behind this project for me, is like there's not really an end goal in mind. There's not one certain thing I'm striving for. It's whatever I'm going to make. I want to put it under here as sort of a catch-all. So there's lots of different avenues that I can explore with it. Um, and it just kind of gives me my own little, I don't know, my own little passion project to just
Yeah.
push sounds and like explore combining different genres and things like that, and weird experimental shit.
Yeah, I mean, because
So,
you do like not only like utilize and produce in, but like you combine a lot of different genres. I mean, you kind of have this catalog of Midwest emo, of pop punk and alt rock, but then also like lo-fi and chiptune, and if you've kind of dipped your toes into a lot of different sounds. So like when producing or doing a vocal track, self-produced or not, like what makes you gravitate towards any of these, like this sort of like wheelhouse of sounds that you've sort of developed over the years?
I think for me, a big part of it is just kind of what fascinates me. I'm going for a certain feeling a lot of the time, and a lot of the sounds that I love and that I kind of move towards, a lot of the time have sort of a sense of nostalgia to it. You know, you've got Midwest emo, you've got lo-fi, which I think is probably one of the cornerstones of my sound, at least
Oh
for my
yeah.
solo stuff, is I just love this idea of taking something that's like electronic and like artificial and kind of making it like I don't know, making it dusty, making it in that way, it kind of feels like I'm humanizing it a little bit. It's
Okay.
like I don't know, it feels like when you take like a hip hop beat, and you make it like really dusty and organic and lo-fi, it feels like I don't know, it feels like something that you were in your grandma's attic and you're like, there's a chest and you open it up and it's like a family heirloom
So
or something.
you're taking a
Like
genre and putting like that, like a little bit of a rustic filter on it sometimes.
yeah, and a lot of it's not released. Well, actually, none of it's released, but more stuff that I'm working on with vocals. I'm doing that too with my production. Is I'm intentionally trying to make the vocals as dusty as like the rest of the instrumental to make them feel like they're like I don't know. It's just not as artificial, but more artificial at the same time. Do you know what
Yeah, yeah,
I
I know.
mean?
Well, I think that a lot of your music and what I love about a lot of your production is you tend to integrate more traditional elements of more like traditional parts of a genre, like like Midwest emo and math rock, like riffs and like time signatures and stuff like that. But when producing, I notice you'll use elements from maybe more like, I don't want to say modern, but more like popularized sounds. Like I will hear like in Midwest Entropy or Exist, you have you know Midwest emo inspired instrumentation, but then you also hear like trap, like emo trap drums and
Mhm.
stuff like that. Um
Yeah, a lot of those, and that's kind of goes back to being able to explore different, not boxing myself into a genre with Hirosha and just being able to like explore whatever I want to do, just things that I love at the time. When I made A Quiet Desperation, it was just a good outlet for me to just try out some emo rap stuff. Like I listen to a lot of it, but and with Carly I work on it a little bit, but I don't have a lot of practice in writing that genre, for like vocals and stuff. So that was kind of an experiment for me to just do a little bit of a hip hop project and see where it take me. See how that would translate with my writing style. You
All
know?
right. I mean, I think it translated phenomenally. And even if you know did take sort of like an emo rap and emo trap approach to that project, um, you have like Sleep Deficit Interlude, which
Yeah.
is one of my favorite songs that you have
Uh,
ever done. Like by far, it's like top
that's a
five.
that's a wacky
Um,
one. It's pretty wild. I'm glad you
well,
like it.
no, I love it, and so I feel like you take a lot of sounds and you experiment with them, but you take more popular sounds and you kind of like blend and mold and craft them into something that is like very much your own while still borrowing and like honoring that sound. um but in terms of production, and like vocal work, I know that you've had a couple different projects over the years. Like Horosha is relatively new in the grand
Yep.
scheme of your music creation, because I know you have Last Chance Avenue and a lot of older stuff. When starting out, was production or vocals like first prioritized? Like, were you immediately just like, I want to like go crazy into production, or was the vocal performances first, or like where did that start with you?
Yeah. So, if we're going like way back, like when I was in like high school and stuff like that, when I was younger than that, um, I started taking guitar lessons when I was around like I want to say like 10 or 11. And from there, I just naturally started writing songs. So, really, more than anything, a lot of the production that I did with like Last Chance Avenue and the full band stuff was more a vehicle for my songwriting. Um, because I'm from a small town in Wisconsin. It was pretty hard to get like bands
Yeah.
together and stuff like that. And I wasn't at that time. I wasn't even really into anything in like the hip hop world. I didn't really get into like anything related to hip hop until around like 2020. Um, but during that time, like my background for the most part is or at least was up until recently, was more as a songwriter. So I would do a lot of singer songwriter stuff on guitar and just fill it out with full band instrumentals. But I guess that is where a lot of the production chops came from, and then I
Mhm.
eventually just kind of translated it over into trying my hand at hip
Well,
hop beats,
I
which
I might
it,
be butchering this phrase, but I believe the phrase is necessity is the mother of invention.
yeah,
I think
I
that's
guess
I
so.
think that's what the
Yeah.
phrase is, where it's like, you're presented with a situation where you don't exactly have like the resources to like bring on a bunch of people for like these big full band instrumentals to support your vocals, so you learn how to produce.
Yeah, I was like, I'm just gonna do it myself. And there was in college when I started doing a lot of more of the full band production
Mhm.
stuff. I was actually we were talking about this right before the interview started. One of my favorite like albums of all time is well, it's part of a bigger album now on like streaming services and stuff, but I think the name of it back in the day, it was a Say Anything EP, and it was called the Menorah Majora EP.
Yeah, yeah,
And it
yeah,
was
yeah.
yeah, it was one of the first things that Max Bemis ever made, and it was just like this shittily recorded, like it was basically, like it was he made it all himself. He did like keyboard
Yeah.
drums, and like just mixed it all himself, and like the sound quality wasn't great, and like it was like the recording quality wasn't great, but there was just something about it. There was just a certain charm about it. And
Yeah.
I listened to that and I was like, "Oh my god. Oh my god, he
Dude,
did this all himself. I
yeah,
can do
like
that."
the
You know?
heart and like the drive and passion behind a lot of Max's recordings, especially um like the B-sides album where you have songs like Baseball But Better and like I Am a
Mhm.
Transylvanian, like stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
You really like you get a glimpse into like, because I think over the years, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like over the years he was kind of like the flagship member of
Mhm.
Say Anything. I think that instrumentalists kind of came and went.
Yeah, he was so it was mostly his project, and then he had a drummer that was on with them every time, and then he brought other people on for like tours and stuff, but he
Yeah.
was the mastermind when it came to all the songwriting and
So
stuff like that.
would you cite that EP that Menorah Majora? Is
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
yeah? So would you cite that as like something you caught early on that maybe would have like influenced you to start creating music yourself?
That was it was one of the things that gave me the confidence to start producing full
Okay.
band stuff myself. Before that I was very much into in like high school, like the first band I really got into was Green Day. And
Nice.
now that some of their newer stuff is like, like in my personal opinion, not as
Yeah.
great. But
But those
but I
old albums
loved
though.
but man, I used to just I loved Green Day like so much. It was like I would learn all their songs, and one of the reasons was because it was mostly power chords, so
Yeah,
I could
yeah.
just easily learn a lot of it. But yeah, I was into stuff like Green Day and Paramore, Rise Against, a bunch of like metalcore bands. Alisana was a big one in high
You got
school,
me
but
into them.
yeah,
I still I
you're
still
welcome.
I still listen to oh shit, it's the song about the girl that dies, if that makes any sense. Virgin Canvas.
Yeah, yeah, Curse of the Virgin Canvas,
That
yeah.
song is crazy, dude. I
Oh
love
yeah, dude,
that.
that whole album's great because it tells a story, and that was one of the first albums that like I realized that you could tell a story and like tell an emotional story with rock, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was like, wow, I got to the end of the album and I was like, this is like moving, you know. Like most of the time with a lot of rock music I'd had before, it's like, yeah, it's like it's fun and like adrenaline and stuff, but
Hmm.
that was like the first time I listened to something where it really elicited like investment in the story and like
Yeah.
emotion, you
I
know.
I'm so glad you say that, because you can't see it, but I have like a whole like list of things just about you. I did a lot of research. I dug deep, and there is a
Oh
very
god, digging up
significant.
some baby pictures.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I got them all. I got your hospital records from the day you were born.
Oh shit.
Um, I have a whole
This.
list about um just like conceptual and conceptual projects and songs and like the influences that like concept albums have had on your music because it's a very
Oh, dude.
recurring theme.
Oh, I
Um,
I am absolute sucker for concept albums. I love when there is something that takes you on a journey,
yeah, well,
throughout it, and it's
I've
like watching a
noticed.
movie.
Yeah, exactly. And I've noticed that most of your projects and even singles, whether it's apparent or more subtle, most of them have conceptual elements that like could be identified and defined. Um, so you have single like Solace and Destruction is
Mhm.
an amazing song, and then you have maybe a more subtle nod to conceptual elements like in Candlelight, the Fifth Repetition, which is one of my favorite instrumental tracks that you've made.
That's the only one.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
it's so
Thanks for bringing up
eerie.
that one. I
It's
almost I forgot
amazing.
about that.
Well, it's eerie, it's dark, and like the I've always admired the ability to have just an instrumental push the story along. It's very easy to just tell a story with words because that is how you traditionally tell a story.
Mhm.
And then you even have on your SoundCloud page, you even have a D&D campaign playlist where
It's got like a whole three songs. Yeah. Oh man. So I was in a D&D campaign like from like I want to say late 2019 to like I want to 2021.
Mhm.
Oh, did my camera just go out?
Yeah, it did.
Oh, okay. Um hold on.
Okay, so now that we're back from a couple minor
Hello.
technical difficulties, we now have we've been refreshed. We have a new angle on life. We have a new camera angle for Hirosha.
Yes.
Um,
It's a new angle on life.
before we disembark from the like the topic and the idea of you doing uh, a multitude of different sounds, I would like to ask sort of like early on you had a lot of punk rock influences and like
Yeah.
on the Wasted Youth EP with Carlby you had even like dance EDM influences there as well, but on that project and in those earlier songs there were still like like there was signs of like what your music would evolve into today. So how was like essentially how was the process of developing that sound, taking inspirations from these different genres and kind of culminating them into the sound that you can call your own?
Well, I think especially with Carly, there is a whole background to that. Like that is essentially the culmination of everything we've worked on since we were in high school. Like if I really want to go back there, Carl and I have been working on, like we've been involved with a bunch of different projects over, I want to say over about 10 years now. In
Mm-hmm.
high school, we started in like a shitty metalcore band. He's going to hate me for saying this. It's called From Under White Lights. You can check it out on Bandcamp. Still plugging it. It was
Hell
terrible. It was really
yeah!
bad.
I'll drop the Bandcamp link in the
Oh, no,
description.
don't. Please don't. But yeah, I like from now that I think about it, we were talking about how I got into producing. A lot of that was also helping Carl out, like over the years basically, because he's always been one that he's always been very much a pop songwriter at heart. He has just explored different sounds throughout the years, and I've always been very good at taking the projects that he has and just sort of filling them out from an instrumental and like mixing standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
We did that, in the metal band, he was actually doing screaming vocals, and I did clean vocals and guitar. And then after that, we had a couple different things. We had this uke pop project called Dear Dreamer, and then I played synth and did backing vocals and stuff on that during a live setting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, all these different iterations, it was essentially, you know, I was helping fill out the sound of whatever Carl's songwriting was.
Okay.
So we kind of took the lessons from each project from that, and like, from then on, it kind of built and built and built until we finally got to Carly, and I think it's just understanding all the things that we learned from like a technical perspective and just from like a songwriting perspective too about all those
Mm-hmm.
different genres and applying it to Carlby.
Yeah, so you've been like doing co-production and some full production with Carlby for a while. Do you like consider there to be like different approach or like a different methodology to things when producing for yourself as opposed to producing for either specific people or just producing something that you hope to just be generally used by anybody that finds it appealing.
Yeah, I would say there's a pretty different contrast with how I produce Carly songs versus my own songs or for somebody else. So I mean, it's pretty straightforward when I produce songs for myself or for other people. I'll start with a loop, I'll write the loop usually, and then I'll just kind of create a structure out of that. Now,
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of the inverse of that process when it comes to Carly songs. Carl usually will get guitar loops from other producers, and he'll write songs on them. And a lot of the time, he will send me, the full songs he's written along with the guitar loops, and then I fill out the instrumental from there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of nice when I'm working on that stuff because it's sort of got a baked in structure a little bit, and I get to
Yeah.
interpret how each section of that song kind of expresses itself. Um, I find that a lot more enjoyable actually than like producing without any kind of vocalist there because it's like, God, what do I put there? Like, where do I
Yeah.
go from here?
You can kind of
But
ping pong it back and forth.
yeah, when you're bouncing ideas off somebody or when you're like reflecting off of somebody's ideas and expanding on them, I think it definitely is helpful. I don't know, it's a lot more conducive to creativity for
Mm-hmm.
me. Um, I think it's very much akin to that idea of like creativity happening because of um you know constructs like
Yeah.
you limitations, right?
Well, it's like you have
So
this foundation to build upon, but the foundation is predetermined. So
yeah,
how do you
so it
take
like
something that has been made and expand upon it in a way that is complementary to like what you already have?
yeah, and it's helpful because it gives you a set of parameters to work with, instead of you get like beat block or like blank canvas. you
Yeah.
know
So and in regards to that, what is your approach to producing purely for yourself? You have a lot of wild and out there beats and production and instrumentals that I think really break through as like self-defining and like individual. And then you also have a lot of production that is maybe a little more, for lack of better terms, reserved and kind of sticks to maybe a more like traditional approach to whatever genre you're doing.
Sure. I would say a lot of the time if I'm doing self-production stuff, like if we're talking about like the liminality releases, like a liminality volume 1 and 2, with both of those, when it came to the initial idea for production and how I went about that, a lot of the time I would have a certain feeling or like a scenario in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So like if we're talking about for example, the song Midnight Path, um, I remember being at work one day and I was like just thinking of like an environment that would or like a vibe that would fit
Yeah.
a beat. And I was like, I really want to make something that sounds really just nocturnal, like it's like a snowy night, you know, like
Bringing
you're
the
walking through a
concepts
path,
always
like
in.
yeah. And I don't know, I feel like that is a good way to kind of aim your creativity so that it's like so that it always feels um like it feels deliberate,
Yeah.
like it feels thought through. So like with that one, I was trying to create a vibe out of a picture that I had in my head, you know, and then like reminiscers in a parking lot slash unconditional love was, basically about just the feeling of camaraderie for somebody, and
Mm-hmm.
like that, like basically it was during the pandemic. Carl and I used to just go and you know smoke out in the parking lot and stuff like that and talk
Mm-hmm.
about like music and shit like that.
The
And it was
biggest Midwest pastime, really.
yeah. But I translated that, into kind of just a vibe that I was looking for, and then I took a quote from Toradora, which is one of my favorite anime, and it's like it's split in half, and it kind of follows the storyline a little bit from that sample in the second half of
Mm-hmm.
it, kind of expands that from like, an individual perspective to this feeling of like you know, I guess goodwill towards, just everyone, like humanity and stuff like that. I don't know. It sounds kind of cheesy, but
No,
like,
it's great. Well,
yeah.
the Liminality series is, as you know, my sort of like favorite series of projects that you do. Um, with Liminality Part One, I was very much attracted to it by, but I love lo-fi. It is one of my favorite genres to listen to and create, and I think that you do an excellent and poignant job at, like you said, taking like these mental images or almost like scenarios in a way and translating them to audio. But then on Liminality Part Two, that poignancy and translation of emotion is still very much there, but you've kind of shifted it in a way to where on Liminality Part 2 you have more production that strays away from what you would like typically think of as lo-fi. You have some more hip hop leaning tracks. You have chiptune on the project as well, and then of course you still have lo-fi. So what was the deviation, like what was like the purpose in that deviation with changing the sound of the project but keeping the Liminality title?
See, I wanted originally, and this kind of moves into like some of releases that I have coming up, but I wanted Liminality to be essentially a process, like when I got to the second one, it's like, okay, I've done lo-fi, I've done, like, I've stuck to a lot of like the genre conventions with
Mm-hmm.
that, and with that, as I wanted to bring in more stuff that's just mentally stimulating to me, like a lot of, like, on reminiscers, there's a lot of like changing time signatures and like more of the math rocky stuff. I just love that shit. I mean, my first release as Hirosha was like a math rock EP.
Empath.
So like, yeah, because I've always just had a huge love for that genre. So I don't know. I wanted to just try something new. I wanted to incorporate, a couple different elements of different
Mm-hmm.
genres in that. And with the next Liminality, I plan to, hopefully even take it even further. I just love the freedom of kind of, especially instrumental music. You can just really dive into like that vibe and that feeling and just kind of go wherever it takes you.
Yeah, and it's
Like,
kind of, there's not really any barriers, like whatever you can think of, like you can pretty much translate it.
oh yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about, I think, production in general. Is like when you start to know your way around like the DAW and like plugins and get the fundamentals out of the way, you can really just make anything you want. It's great. It's just a playground for your imagination. And I don't know. I just love that. I just love being able to create new things that are, unexpected combinations of stuff. So, like, I
Hell
mean,
yeah. Hell yeah.
I don't know. Like, if we're talking about like Awakening on Liminality Volume 2, it's like that's a chiptune song, but it goes into like, a little bit of a lo-fi section with
No,
piano and
yeah,
stuff,
for
and then it
sure.
does a full like chiptune gent breakdown, which I was just like, uh, you know, fuck it, let's do it,
Have
because it's
you
fun.
have you seen the title of the new Periphery album?
Um, I don't know. I can't remember it off the top of my head right now. I know it was
Well,
like kind of a joke, right?
the
It's like
title
gent
of
is not a genre
Gent
or
is not a
something.
genre. Do you have any comment after you've just outed yourself as a known chiptune gent producer?
Uh, you know, Misha and I can square up, all right? It's like, I say gent is a genre.
Well, you heard
And
it here first, folks. Hirosha hates Periphery.
whoa, hey now, buddy. No,
Um,
I think they're fine artists. I think they do a lot of the chugs. It's a great time.
I love the chugga chug chugs. Okay.
I do indeed.
Um, so with Liminality, for me, it's my favorite series of projects you do. But also, you mentioned that you have, the Math Rock EP, and I believe the name of the EP is, yeah, Empath is the
Yep,
EP.
that's correct.
Um, what is, I suppose what is the approach there where you are developing a sound, and an Empath in this case was a math rock project. what is
Mhm.
what is the sort of turning point where you say to yourself, I've been working on a sound or style or general, like, to be vague, vibe for a long time. But now I kind of want to like bring up old influences and new influences to create a project that to some extent deviates away from what I typically find myself doing.
Well, I think it's worth saying that the Empath EP actually was I was making that before HOROSHA was like actually a thing.
Oh, okay.
Um, so I it's once again it kind of goes back to that idea of I want HOROSHA to be kind of just a catch-all for anything that I want to do, you know. And like it started out as disparate stuff, you know, like I had the Math Rock EP, and then I just started Liminality, which is lo-fi, and then I
Mm.
had Quiet Desperation, which was like emo hip hop stuff. But my like I think my intent, you know, at this point is to fuse all of those things together into one chimera genre, you know?
Well, you've been doing
So
a
like
pretty good job at it so far.
so yeah, so that's what I want to do, especially with Liminality, is kind of bring all of those influences and have them be relevant in like a meaningful way. You know what I mean? So that it creates something new. It's not quite lo-fi, it's not quite math rock, it's not quite in the hip hop realm either, but it
Mhm.
takes stuff from all of that, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, I know you mentioned earlier, like about the concept and the idea of blending genres. But you said an interesting phrase that for a brief period of time I want to expand upon because
Sure.
very rarely, in the scene that I guess we could consider ourselves to be a part of, very rarely do I see such an importance being put on to time signatures in beats.
Well, yeah, I think it's because with a lot of producers, it's like you don't want to confuse the vocalists, right? I mean, a lot of the time, I mean, if you go into the history of hip hop, it's based around danceable beats. You know, they would go into
Mhm.
clubs and play, you know, these drum breaks and put them on loops and create new instrumentals over them. And it started out, you know, as like dancing music. You know,
Mhm.
so to like bring like odd time signatures in that aren't really like danceable is kind of like it's kind of like breaking one of the like main tenets a little bit or one of the main trends. But I don't know, I'm really interested in seeing what you can do with hip hop instrumentation when it's applied in like, you know, a math
Yeah.
rocky like weird experimental realm like that. Like I feel like I haven't heard much of it, so I just want to know what it sounds like,
Okay.
you
Well,
know.
I have a follow up question to that then, because
Mhm.
me personally, do not know. I don't know much of music theory. I know enough to get by. I know enough to play instruments, but beyond that, the very technical aspects of music theory are unknown to me.
It's
I mean,
okay. Some of them are better left unknown, anyways.
so where do you see the benefit in sort of like going into interesting or less used time signatures, or even changing the time signature for a section of a song? Like what do you believe that brings to a song, and like what does it provide that you couldn't normally get?
I just think, okay, so to answer this question, I'm gonna go back to when I first discovered math rock. So, when I first discovered math rock, I discovered a band called Icarus the Owl. So I was like getting ready for a family trip, and like one of the local venue owners in my town posted on Facebook because they were coming to town. I
Mm-hmm.
heard this and I was like, holy fucking shit. I need this. So like I was desperately trying to like cuz you know, you could either pirate music or buy it. There weren't streaming services back in like 2011, or at least it wasn't very popular. So my parents were like trying to get me to like leave because we're trying to go on this trip, and I'm like, wait, just give me a minute. I gotta wait for this to download. So I listened to that like pretty much exclusively on the trip, and I think just that band opened up the possibility that you don't have to like stick to a certain meter or whatever. It just felt so original and so like freeing, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like it's an avenue for like exploring musical ideas that, you know, you can just kind of go off and do whatever whenever, and it's kind of like anything goes, you know? And I find that super exciting, and it just scratches my brain in the perfect way, you know? So like I love incorporating that into my music because it's like kind of this blast of if you're listening to it, like, whoa, what the fuck did I just hear?
Kind of catches
You
you
know?
off guard, very unconventional in a way.
Yeah,
um
and it's cool seeing grooves like manifest in that context. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Still being able to make it be like something that is like intelligible.
Yeah, like, breaking away from maybe a more conventional sound, but like not so much as to where it's complicated or whatever, just for the sake of being so.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. The main reason I would say that I incorporated a lot in my music is like I said, it just scratches my brain the perfect way. So I'm like, I just like it. So I just put it in there. You know, it's just fun. I like complex rhythms and stuff like that. It's just
Yeah.
off kilter little
Um
grooves.
so now that we've kind of like addressed a lot of like what makes you tick production wise and how you have different approaches to like vocal songs and all that stuff. I know you mentioned earlier that there were some, I guess, levels of songwriting in certain genres that you were kind of still acquainting yourself with. Um, and when I think of songs, the two that come to mind, I previously mentioned, would be like Midwest Entropy and
Mhm.
Exist. So at what point did you kind of, I guess, begin to develop songwriting specifically for vocals in terms of like this newer sort of like, I don't like using the word modern, but like modern
Yeah, modern.
underground sound.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you start writing underground music?
Yeah, well, you know, that was kind of the thing. Is like, so I'm like one of my biggest influences for writing are like, you know, a lot of pop punk bands, like of the Wonder Years, of Paramore, and stuff like that. But like I feel like the approach to vocals and lyricism and stuff is so different in pop punk and emo and stuff versus hip hop. There's something there that's just a little different, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So like I was trying to figure out how to translate my voice to that context, just because I feel like a lot of the early stuff that I would try to write hip hop wise felt a little like clunky or like cheesy, you know, because I wasn't aware of kind of like the cliches, you know,
Yeah.
as much. Well, because like I said, I only got into hip hop fairly recently, so that was kind of a way of trying to analyze how other people do vocals in hip hop and sort of bring that into how I approach vocals, you know?
Yeah.
Cause like,
Well,
you know, like I wasn't really familiar a lot with like doing like rap style deliveries and stuff, but on both of those songs, I try that out for like verses and stuff,
yeah,
you
well,
know?
like, I've you've like familiarized me with a lot of those early influences. Like, Green Day was like the big one. Then you have Paramore, and then you say metalcore bands like Alisana and stuff like that. When first introducing yourself into a more underground scene and sound and genre and stuff like that, who were some newer artists that you came across that kind of like maybe not influenced, but kind of like helped shape that initial sound when like introducing yourself into that scene, like as Hirosha, like this is vocal Hirosha.
Oh, so well, I'm gonna talk about how we got involved in the genre in the first place. So in
Awesome.
like 2019, Carl and I both stumbled upon Shinigami. So I know that he would probably hate me calling it emo rap, but like, but like, I'll never be in memory. Wait, hold. What's the name of that? It's
I will never be a
um,
memory.
yeah, I will never be in
It's a
memory.
banger
Like that
song.
album, fucking that album was just super foundational to like how I understand
Mm-hmm.
like emo hip hop or like whatever you want to call it, like that sphere of things. It was that there was the Body Bag EP by Lo- uh, Lotus.
Yeah.
Um
Oh, dude, I used to bump the Lotus a lot.
yeah, I mean that EP in particular I loved. And then another one that was a big influence on me as I first started getting into SoundCloud and checking people out who like weren't like, you know, like bigger names.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say one of the first releases from me that really caught my attention was Haley Manzaron's "I Am Manzaron" EP. That was really one of the first releases in like the underground SoundCloud scene that I was like, "Fuck yes, I'm gonna bump this all the time."
Hell,
Um,
that's a great project, by the way.
it is, you know, it's like I think it's not on there anymore, but the first song on that EP was just fucking amazing. I'm trying to bring it up. I'm terrible at remembering like song names and
Oh
stuff
no,
like that, which is why
you're
I'm looking at
good.
my phone right now.
Sometimes I'll see a song name pop up like in like my shuffle, and I'm like, what is? And then I'll hear it, and I'm like, yeah, no, I liked that
Oh,
on Spotify
oh,
yesterday.
appreciate. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
one's
yeah.
amazing. It's Only Me Again. It's fantastic. I mean, honestly, whole EP, but those two in particular, it just kind of like familiarized me with like, hey, this is what emo hip hop is.
Yeah,
You
and,
know?
and speaking of like that scene and that underground like sort of style of making music, I want to get your opinion on the genre of, and I know that like it seems like we've exhausted this topic, but I promise this is I'm going somewhere with
Oh no,
this.
you're good. You're good.
The genre of Midwest emo has
Mm,
kind of been reshaped and claimed by a large portion of like underground like emo rap and trap artists, where a sound that you evidently grew up with. You're from the Midwest, and you
you
have
know,
a lot of bands like modern baseball and American football, two
mhm.
sports related
Sports.
names,
Yeah,
and
that's a bit of a trend in emo. You
tiny
know?
moving parts, like bands like these that really helped shape and form Midwest emo, and now you're seeing it um, sort of being taken by underground artists and having it repurposed into something that maybe more fits the sound of that scene.
Hmm.
So how do you see that transition? Like, what do you like about it? What do you dislike about it? Like, just what are your thoughts on it?
Honestly, I love it. I love everything about it. I don't know. Being someone who works in Carly, obviously that's kind of like preaching to the choir. But like I don't know. It's really cool just seeing that specific aesthetic picked up by a lot of people in emo hip hop, and underground like SoundCloud scene and stuff. I just think it's one of those things that doesn't seem obvious when you think about it, but once you hear it in context of a song, you're like, oh my god,
Yeah,
this is the perfect combination, right? Because I mean, you have like all these like twinkly clean guitars and stuff. It makes like the perfect backdrop for like hip hop beats and like some soaring clean vocals or even a rap or something like that.
yeah. Well, it's very much
So
taken over in a lot of ways.
yeah, I'm worried. I'm actually worried that it's gonna be a boom and bust thing.
This is what I was
Like
looking for. This is what I
I'm
was. This
worried.
is the opinion I'm looking for.
I'm worried because I love Midwest emo that it's going to become like uncool. It's gonna get to a saturation point and people are like, oh, you're doing Midwest emo. I'm like, no, I want to do Midwest emo.
I've been doing this.
Yeah, you know.
Well, I think that point is not necessarily unavoidable, but
Hmm.
it is by all means a regular occurrence. You see it happen in a lot of genres. It happened to emo trap in a lot of people's opinion, and so things moved on to like the new sounds of like hyperpop and PC music, and then those sounds got very
I feel like
quickly
yeah, I feel like
saturated as
even
well.
I feel like even hyperpop is like slowly it's slowly falling popularity wise. I feel like
I
I don't
see.
know.
That's where we disagree because I think it very quickly burnt out. In my opinion, I
Oh
think it
yeah.
very quickly burnt out. Um, and it's an interesting phenomenon where you see people, a lot of people will kind of pioneer a genre, and then a lot of piggybackers, and I don't mean that like
Mhm.
in a mean or derogatory way, but like a lot of people that hop onto that trend because they think it's interesting, they think it's fun, it's a new thing to try. It like immediately becomes super saturated.
Oh yeah, and it's one of the things like you said is there's nothing wrong with people like hopping on and like
Mhm.
emulating a genre just because for the love of it, but unfortunately that is kind of like the rhythm of things. It's like, people I think I was like this reminds me of like a music history class that I took in college, and it was the progression of like Gregorian chant music, right?
Oh, really?
So it started, yeah. So it started off with like I'm talking like like 1400s, 1500s. They're like three voices. I don't remember what the names of them are, but it was basically just the melody, and then they did like a lower part that was
Mhm.
slower. It was like the melody in halftime, and then there was something above it that was not harmonizing quite because they didn't really have a concept of that yet. But um throughout the ages, like this Gregorian chant, it's just got more and more advanced and more like, people like expanded more upon it and like the
Mhm.
rhythms got really confusing. It just got super multi-layered and then that kind of went out of vogue, you know? once it got to
Okay.
a point where like, so I think it's like the natural rhythm of how music genres work is,
That's
you
really
you get
interesting. That's
yeah,
really cool how
isn't
that.
it?
I mean,
Like
that's
even back then,
like it shows that that trend is nothing new.
Oh yeah. Even with when you talk about like, classical era music going into romantic music, it's the same thing, It's like there is a foundational idea, and then the rest of the artist community or like, that person's peers or whatever, they get a hold of it and then they, build upon it. So it naturally gets more and more complicated, or more advanced idea wise, until it kind of finally just drops off and somebody like breaks the mold and does something completely different, and then the cycle begins again
Yeah,
you know
I mean it. I mean, I think with that taken into account, it's almost like genres, or I guess just music creation as a whole is almost cyclical in a way.
yeah, I think so.
Starting from a baseline, building up to an immense level of notoriety and hype, falling off. Pieces of that are picked up, and just kind of the process is repeated in a way.
Oh yeah, and then 20 years later somebody does a revival for it. And then
20
then it
years
happens all over again.
20 years
uh
later, Machine Gun Kelly is doing a cover of Aerials by System of a Down.
oh boy, that was a bad one.
Oh, I gotta stop. That's the second time I've brought up MGK
he's
during an
gonna he's gonna get
interview.
mad, bro. He's gonna call you out personally.
I mean, I have a 50% rate of bringing up MGK during an interview.
That is a
Now
lot. That is a lot of percentage. that's
it's too
that's
high.
half of 100,
Yeah, so
man.
I'm gonna very quickly
Yeah,
divert the topic away from
but
him.
before we go with it though, it's
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
I don't know. That was, I don't know. On the topic of like simplicity versus like more complicated stuff. So for example, a lot of the bands that like that I listened to when I was coming up were like 2010s, early 2010s, you know. That was like the advanced era of pop punk, right? Because
Yeah.
I would listen to Blink 182, and I actually wasn't a big fan of Blink 182. I'd listen to it and I'd be like, wow, this just, I don't know, something about it. It just seems really like basic, or unoriginal.
Hmm.
But that's only in context of the things that came after it, you know?
Yeah.
A lot of the bands that started these trends, if you look back on it, like from the point of like the genre's peak, popularity or whatever, a lot of those bands, they can seem kind of unoriginal or like bland or something, but that's because they were the progenitors of those first ideas, you know
Yeah, it almost seems like too, like you said, like too simple or whatever, cuz I know that when, cuz that was kind of the experience I had at first too, where I listened to a lot of pop punk growing up. I listened to a lot of Green Day, I listened to a lot of Blink 182.
Mhm.
I listened to, like Panic at the Disco, like A Fever You Can't Sweat Out is like kind of like a gothic rock
Hell yeah.
or punk album. So I listened to a lot of that, and I remember first being introduced to the Ramones,
Oh yeah.
who, and the Ramones are one of like the biggest proprietors of like modern pop punk.
Oh yeah, they were like
And
one of the OG punk bands,
yeah,
well, not, I
and I
mean,
listened.
they're like,
I mean,
but yeah,
there I think
there's a
it's,
couple before them, but they were like, they were one of the big like punk bands before pop punk.
well, yeah,
But
because
yeah.
at that point you had like the British invasion.
Yeah, there's,
Um
I don't know, I don't know a lot about that, but I know that. So
but I think it's interesting because I would listen to the Ramones, and I would kind of think, well, this feels kind of simple, right? Like
yeah,
this, it feels almost too straightforward.
yeah,
But like you said, in the context of what came after it, that's because they and many other punk bands at the time were like the foundation for what the genre grew over like two
yeah, they
decades to become.
yeah, everybody else built off of that, so it's not that they're like the unoriginal ones, quote unquote, like everybody else is,
Yeah,
pretty much,
yeah, it's
you know.
it's everyone else.
Like, but yeah, I mean, I don't know, I mean, I don't think simple is bad in any respect. I
Mhm.
just think, I think that's a lot of the perception for me when I go back to the founders of like whatever genre. I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, it's so strange how like they're the first ones to come up with this, but at the same time, it feels like it's been done a million times before because it has by other people. So
It's funny how that works, where it's just kind of this, like this almost like endless recycling. Not like even in a bad way. It's just it's so everything is just so defined by something else to some
But yeah,
extent.
it's I feel like it's impossible to be truly, original, because
Like
everything is derived from
in a
something else.
technical sense, you know.
Yeah. But
Um,
that's why there's a quote, there's a band that I listened to back in like, I don't know, like 2010s, that they said this at one of their shows, and they said the only originality left is honesty. And I think that really hits, you know,
that's pretty good.
because yeah, because everything's been done before. All you don't need to worry about how like innovative or whatever you're being unless you want to. It's about just creating what's true to you, and
Yeah.
that's the way that you're going to be original, is just being honest and like expressing what you feel and putting that into art.
Well, yeah. Well, it's like anybody can make rock, anybody can make punk, anybody can make hip hop, but like nobody can be you.
Yeah,
So that's like
exactly. There's
that's perfect. I
yeah, there
like that
was
a lot.
I know, right? It's a fun quote, and I feel like it takes a lot of the pressure off too,
It's very
of
comforting.
being an artist.
It's very
Yeah.
comforting. Um. Oh, I do want to say this. Um. You briefly mentioned it earlier, and it was definitely like something that I wanted to talk about. You and Carlby have kind of been kicking it at live shows recently,
Yeah.
and you all have been doing a wonderful job,
Thank you.
performing a lot of your all songs live. I've seen the videos, and it looks like a lot of fun. Um, how was that like step to performing your like original songs live? Because I know that live performance is like one of the first like huge steps in like progressing your art, showcasing your art with, pretty much immediate feedback.
Hmm.
So like how was the step to doing that? Like what was the process of being like I want to perform live up to like I am now performing live.
So it was quite a process to figure out what we were gonna do with that, because I've done live performances before. Like I've performed at a lot of open mics and done like singer songwriter shit, and
Mhm.
we've performed throughout the years with bands and stuff. But electronic music is like a whole different ball game, right? Because you have to figure out, A, how am I gonna get it up? How am I gonna get the music going in the first place? B, how am I gonna keep it engaging to people, because it is a performance,
Yeah.
right? And then like C, how can I make that like a framework that we can reproduce with like new songs that we want to bring in and things like that. So it was like roughly the mic fall down.
It's just been like
Yeah, yeah,
slowly
it's chilling.
tilting.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
I'm nipping it in the bud so it doesn't
but
fall.
yeah, it was like a year long process. It was middle of, like it was like 2021 ish. We started getting ready to do live shows, and I was mostly just trying to figure out how to make it work from a software point of view. We run Ableton
Mhm.
live, and then I set up a bunch of tracks for like guitar loops, um, and I record like loops live, and then it records onto another track for
Okay.
the playback, so I can mix them individually,
That
But
sounds very complicated.
yeah, it was just like every time I would try and figure out how to solve one problem in a live setting, like it would crop up another thing. It
Yeah.
was like, first of all, it's like, how do I change the tempo, in a way that's like dynamic and I can do relatively easily instead of having to click a bunch of shit.
Yeah.
It all came down to trying to MIDI map stuff onto my keyboard, so I could just do a press of a button, bam, loads up that area with like the backing track dropped in and all the loops and stuff set up. I tried to set stuff up with loop pedals, but that didn't work. I ended up actually doing automation lanes for a lot
Okay.
of it. So a lot of it is hands free when I do like live shows and stuff. There's really not any like foot pedals I push. I have on my amp sim, I have the tones automated um in there, so I don't have to hit anything. It just changes to the, like, say I want to go from clean guitar to distorted, it'll just, when it gets to that point in the timeline, just changes it
Yeah, so you've essentially
automatically.
like micromanaged all of these different elements to kind of create a bit smoother of
Yeah.
an experience. Were there
Yeah,
any
but
were
it
there any songs that initially stuck? Oh, my bad, my bad. You go, you go.
oh, well, yeah, and it's just like it was but I try to keep like performance, try to keep it at least a little bit spontaneous too. I try to like keep it challenge with guitar. I don't want to make it too easy, because I feel like if
Yeah.
you make it too easy, then it's not really performance, right?
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
but yeah, so I like the idea of doing the guitar loops live instead of just having a backing track and singing it over it.
Yeah. So like
We take out
keeping
some of the
some
stems
element
and
of it natural,
yeah,
and like in the
I love
moment.
just switching between like keyboard and like guitar and stuff, and it's just I
Yeah, I've
it's
seen
it
the
may be
videos.
unnecessarily busy, but it's fun. It just makes my brain serotonin go whoop.
Well,
So,
I've seen the videos of you performing live, holding the guitar like while like over the keyboard, like just going
yeah,
at it.
yeah,
Um,
it's fun, because it's almost like I don't know, when we're in like when we've got in ears and stuff or whatever, it almost feels like I'm playing a video game or something,
it's
you
just
know?
like so sort of like an immersive aspect.
Yeah, yeah, because playing the guitar, and like getting those loops set up, and like when you nail a loop and it just sounds great, you're like, fuck yes. And it's like I'm gonna play my keyboard,
It's
and
just like an
do the
instant
loop
boost to
there.
confidence.
Yeah, so it's fun. I really enjoy playing live. And it's just also fun to get our songs out there from like, obviously like furthering the brand or whatever, but it's fun to just there's just something so cathartic about getting up there and just singing, and like
Hmm.
being able to portray whatever emotion you're feeling in the moment on stage, you know.
Yeah.
So
And, it's also like it's a very like it's very grassroots, very direct form of like getting yourself out there. When you post a link to a song, anybody can see that, and also nobody has to click it. Everyone can
yeah,
scroll right on by. They see that blue, they see text, but it's blue, and they're like, no, thank you. But when performing live, you have that
yeah, you're
immediate,
there. You're
yeah, you
like in the
have
venue,
that immediate feedback whether you want it or not. But I'm assuming if you're performing live, you probably do want it. Like I'm sure you
Yeah,
probably don't
you
want
know.
people to just like stare at you,
Oh
give you
God,
like
no.
the
Oh,
Kubrick stare for 45 minutes.
we had one set a while ago where everybody was like sitting in the back, you know,
Oh no.
and I was like, oh, this is it's a little uncomfortable, but it's like you get at that point, you just it becomes about I'm just going to perform this anyways, just because I'm having fun,
Well,
you
yeah,
know.
like at the
It's
end of the
not
day, you're
about
doing it for yourself.
yeah, I mean, it can be definitely a little like discouraging if I don't see anybody, um, but at the end of the day, it's still fun, still a good time.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I feel like I feel like I might have told you about this maybe like when it happened. But I went to an open mic that my brother was doing a couple
oh
months
yeah,
ago, and it was set in like a first come first serve time slot list. Um,
mhm.
and a guy had like the second to last time slot at like maybe like 11:30 p.m. So by this point, most of the people that had gone on, the people that were there to see them had left, or like people that were there just to watch music had gone home because they were tired because it was 11:30. And this
You'd be
guy
getting
came
late.
up. This guy got on stage at like 11:30, 11:35, and he was an emo trap artist.
Hmm.
And despite there being like maybe like 8 or 9 people there, maybe two of them within 20 feet of him, he gave the hardest show I've ever seen. His energy did not stop the
Hell yeah,
entire time. Dude was
that's what I'm talking
he
about.
he was like like doing like rolls on stage. He like climbed one of the pillars in the middle of the venue, and was like singing, hanging from the pillar. It was insane. It was insane.
Fuck yeah, punk as
Um,
fuck. I love it.
and I was like, that is like a true sort of like encapsulation of the sort of like cathartic energy when performing live.
Yeah, it's just like it's just fun. Whether there's like 3 people in there or like fucking 50 people. It's fun to see that your art is like impacting someone right there. I
Hmm.
don't know.
And see,
Yeah,
that's my favorite kind of venue, honestly. I love going to like a bar with like a maximum capacity of like 1 or 200 people,
yeah.
and watching live music. I mean, I'm trying to see you and Carl perform live, but
Hell yeah,
it's it's either
trying to
a
go
bit
over to Wisconsin
it's
here.
either a bit of a drive or an expensive flight. I don't know which one
Yeah,
is is
I know it
worth it to me.
sucks. That's the thing about the internet. Is you make all these friends, and they're like, "Oh shit, we're on the other side of the country. Fuck."
I mean, I'm probably like 8 hours away. I could make that
Yeah,
trip.
it's a good
But
trip though.
you
But
know, in
no, I
terms
love
of,
small venues too. Like
oh yeah,
the last the last show we played was in July, and it was in this tiny ass, like tiny little room, like that was next to a coffee shop. But man, it was the hardest show that we've played ever. It was like because it was with the Jelvin, who are a cyber grind band.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. No,
it's
I
crazy, super heavy.
I found them through you guys.
Yeah, they're great. Those are the homies. Um, but yeah, we were playing before them, and that was the only mosh pit we've ever gotten was at that show. We played Vampire, and like fucking people just went like
Well,
nuts.
see,
Oh
Vampire's
god,
got
it
that
was
drop.
people started fucking, you know. So like, oh, it was yeah, that was a fun time.
I was in a circle pit in a Less Than Jake concert.
Oh yeah,
Which also happened to be at the same venue that this emo trap guy went crazy at.
nice.
And so I'm sure you can imagine a circle pit of people running, throwing their arms while on stage, and around the circle pit there are people like, like skanking. Is that
Yeah,
what the dance is
yeah,
called?
yeah. Uh huh.
um,
I know what you're talking about.
yeah, it's crazy, crazy fucking time. But like, I love those sort of energetic venues. Like, one of my favorite like concert videos is a video of Ramshackle Glory, um, performing in just someone's house.
Yeah, I feel like that would be really crazy. I feel like I don't know. I saw I don't know. There's an old video floating around of Chiodos when they were like super tiny too, and they performed in a living room, like at somebody's
Nice.
fucking house. Yeah, and there was a bunch of people. It was oh man, what I wouldn't have given to be in that room. I probably would have had hearing damage
What the
now,
fuck is
but
up,
you know,
Denny's?
dude, I want to play a Carly show at a Denny's. Come on.
Did you guys have to do it?
Oh man,
That would
that would be
be.
sick.
I would drive for that. If you guys performed at Denny's, I would get in my car right now.
I mean, is it really anybody? Is it not anybody's goal to play at a Denny's? Like, you got to recreate the meme,
No,
you know?
exactly. Well, see, I'm from West Virginia, so my goal is to do a live show in a Waffle House,
Ah, okay.
and that
I
is,
feel like they'd let you do that,
dude.
honestly.
I mean, anything goes there. I feel like I wouldn't even have to ask. I feel like if I walked in, set up my
Just set up
equipment,
your
and just
shit and
started
they like
going,
don't
they'd be like,
care.
"All
Yeah.
right, cool. I got a Waffle House 2 miles that way and one half a mile that way."
Like that's two venue options already, you know?
Exactly. Two
Like
venues that close to home.
yeah, man, you got to put on some shows. Come on.
I I I, I love Waffle House. So like Waffle House, if you see this, please let me perform at one of your restaurants.
Fuck
I
yeah.
will only disappoint
I'll go in there. I'll
everyone
go to
a
the
little
show.
bit.
I'll start moshing with the employees, It'll be great.
Fight breaks out. Honestly, I feel like there's a mosh pit at the average Waffle House just like a couple times a week. No music necessary.
Yeah, it's fucking everybody's just so
Um, but I on the topic of live performances, I do have a question. When creating set lists, are
mhm.
there, instead of just picking out like just like your favorite songs you've made, are there songs that stick out to you initially as like just being better suited for live performance?
Oh yeah, there's a few of them. One of my favorite ones to do live for us is Foresight. That's a great one. Class of '68 is also that's one of our evergreen songs, never leaving the set list pretty much. Um, but yeah, there's like it really depends on like I guess the mood that we're going for that set. I mean, a lot of the time we've opened for a couple different genres of bands. So like,
Hmm.
for example, with Bajelvin, we skewed heavier stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
We and then we're opening for the Astronomers in February. And they're a pop band, so we're gonna do more upbeat, like more electronic, hyper poppy stuff.
Okay.
You know, so
So maybe in the context of who you'll be with, influences
yeah,
the
it's
set
just trying
list.
to program it, in a way that kind of fits the rest of the bill. Obviously,
Okay.
you can only change it so much because your songs and your style are yours.
Yeah.
You know, but you can program stuff in one way or the other. Pick, drop this song in, take another one out. That just suits kind of the vibe of the show a little better.
Yeah. So how many times have you like performed now?
Not that many actually. We had let me see. I think we've performed like 5 times
Okay. I mean,
ever.
I would consider that
Yeah.
more than enough times to sort of like get your footing and understand, I guess, what is necessary and like
Oh
what
yeah.
to perform. What would you say, in your personal opinion, what defines irregardless of that's redundant. Regardless of audience reaction, what would you define as like a successful show?
Successful show. I would say that, you know, if our performances went well, if it felt good, if like if you felt the energy of it instead of kind of like going through the motions, if you're like present during the set
Mm-hmm.
and just being able to put on the best show you can, I think, as long as you come away from it having a good time, I think that counts as a good show. If it felt good, because sometimes you get in a venue and it's just like the sound, like the monitors are being weird or whatever, or the sound guy is like not cooperating with you or whatever. I think that's a good indicator of the mood for me, is like how smoothly the show goes and how
Yeah.
good you feel when you're performing.
Okay. I mean that makes sense. Yeah. Have you is this from personal experience? Have you had issues with sound guys? You had sound guys that weren't.
Not really sound guys. We did play a show. It was for a benefit last summer. It was like a Pride brunch or whatever. Apparently, I felt great when we were doing the show, but like we got off stage and people were like, yeah, nobody could understand what you were saying or anything.
No.
I was like, oh shit. And
That's
then
so
there's been
unfortunate.
times, yeah, there've been times when like when we were first getting used to the in-ears, like I did a jump. We were performing I decided not to stay,
Hmm.
and like it got to the big ending part or whatever, and I did a jump right before it got into like the heavy full band part, and my in-ears just clunk, like unplugged from like my
No.
pack because they're corded. I was like, fuck. So, and because it's most of it's in the box, it's like tracks or whatever, it's not coming through the wedge speakers or any stage volume or at all. So I was like having to listen to the mains or whatever. And luckily the sound engineer actually, like, it was the guy who owns our local venue. His name's Steve. He's a fucking magician. But he noticed that I was like having a hard time hearing, so he just brought the wedge monitor volumes up, and in my head I'm like, "Thank you, Steve.
Very quick
Thank you."
thing. Very quick
Yeah,
thinking.
yeah.
All
So,
right, give
but it's
me.
it's stuff like that. It's like technical little
Yeah.
difficulties. One time I had the capo wrong when we were playing cut me off, and we started it in the wrong key, and it
Oh
was just
no.
yeah, it was that was a little awkward.
At least
But you
that's
know
like
what?
an easy
You just
fix.
well, I mean, we ended up just being like, okay, we'll just skip it on the set, go to the next one,
Okay.
and that's the thing about performing live. It's like even if you monumentally screw up, like just move on to the
Yeah,
next one.
just keep
You know,
going. Who
it's
cares,
all right.
really?
Like I think once you learn to laugh at yourself when you make perform well mistakes live instead of being like mortified, stuff like that, that's I feel like when you can truly get freedom on that. Because there was a certain point where I'd be like, oh shit, I'm so afraid I'm gonna fucking mess it up, which I still get
Yeah.
nervous sometimes with it. But a lot of the time it's like if I screw up a lyric or something, it's like
What can
like
you do? But anyways, I think that we can probably close things up here. You've been a
sure.
wonderful guest. You have
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
really
This is a lot of
embellished
fun.
on a lot of things that I wanted to hear. No, yeah, I'm really glad you had a good time. This was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for sharing. Um, before we end it, is there anything that like you want to put out there that you want to promote, like something you might be working on or something that you've just recently released?
Yeah, there's a couple things. As far as promotions for Carlby, we are actually working on a full-length album right now. I don't know if Carl wants to disclose the name yet, so I'm not gonna
You'll keep
say
that. You'll
that or
keep that.
anything. But we are working on an album, and we're getting pretty close. I actually just did some vocals on it for that today.
Nice.
As far as solo stuff, I have a short 3-track EP that I'm wanting to put out here pretty soon. I'm waiting on edits for a couple music videos that I shot when I was in
Very
Chicago
excited for those.
over August. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Didn't
And
you used
then
to
there
live in
is
Chicago?
yeah, briefly.
Okay.
It's for about a year and a half after college.
Oh, okay, okay.
So yeah, I went up there to visit some friends. And there's a friend of mine that is into video. He does photographs for a lot of like cosplay people. At like cons, and he was like, "Let's do a music video." I was like, "Yeah, let's do it."
Dude, those
So
cosplay photographers are incredibly talented.
oh yeah,
Like,
the footage that we got, fantastic. It just looks like top notch. Um, but yeah, I can't wait to show that. And then I am also working on a full length of my own, and I'm gonna announce the title of it right now. It's called The Naturalist. So
I've been waiting for this.
yeah, so it's gonna be a loose concept album. It's got some non-concept songs in there, but I'm planning kind of a whole visual thing with it too. Once I get the final track written, and then the rest kind of polish up on it. But it's mostly done. I just have to, polish a lot of the tracks, and then wait for like a couple features, and it's almost done, and then I can put it out to the world.
Well,
So
I'm
yeah,
very excited for that about that. Well, thank you so much for
yeah,
letting me pick your brain for an hour or so.
of course.
Everyone, go listen to Hirosha.
Thanks.
I don't know, go follow him
You're
on
the
Twitter.
best.
Go follow him on Twitter or something.
Yeah, you
Go to
can see
his
me shit post.
yeah, you see him. Well, go like all of his shitpost tweets. Um, and then
Maybe check out my music.
yeah,
It's
that's
like
that could
maybe.
be a thing as well.
All right. Well, thank you.
Bye.